Good day, my friends. Welcome back to a discussion on the Solaris 11 operating system. This is a segment that will pick up from where we stopped when we discussed the automated installation in Solaris 11 OS. So before watching this video, I hope you would familiarize yourself with the automated installation procedure in Solaris 11, because this video is going to continue from where we stopped in the AI installation video of Solaris 11. Just to help you recollect what we discussed in the previous video, we had a client on which we wanted to install Solaris 11, for which we set up a automated install server. We ran through the install ADM command to create an AI service. Along with the AI service, we also had a DHCP service. Then we created a manifest for a specific client. The manifest contained information like the hard disk partitioning and the image packaging system from where the client gets its packages. And then we created a profile for the client and associated that profile with the client. When the client was booted onto the network, the DHCP server responded back. The client got access to the AI service. It started booting, and eventually it performed the installation of the operating system from the image packaging system that was mentioned in the manifest. It would be repetition if I go through that steps again in this video. So if you're not familiar with the automated installation procedure in Solaris 11, I'd strongly encourage you to have a look at it before watching this video. In this video, we're going to do the AI installation all over again. The only difference being, we will not be installing the client from the image packaging system repository. Instead, we would install the client using a unified archive which we have created of a Solaris 11 box. Historically, Solaris 10 had a feature called Flash Create, an archive that you could create of a Solaris 10 machine which could be easily extracted onto a new box to perform the installation of Solaris 10. That was supposed to be the most fast way of performing installation of Solaris 10 operating system. In Solaris 11, when the OS was launched in the year 2011, there was nothing that could relate to the Flash archive of Solaris 10. But from 11.1 version, 11.1 release of the Solaris 11 onwards, a new installation technique was introduced. I wouldn't say a new installation technique, a new format was introduced in the form of Unified Archive, wherein you could take a full archive of a machine, of a Solaris 11 box. When I say full archive, that includes the global zones, the non-global zones that exist in Solaris 11 operating system, and use that archive to bring up a brand new box, either by using an automated install, or you could use a media-based installation and point to this archive. So there is also an option of just taking the archive of non-global zone that exists and then bring up a new zone in a different box using that archive. There is a separate video that's already available on this playlist that talks about creating an archive of a zone and extracting that archive to bring up a new zone in Solaris 11. In this episode, we would concentrate on the automated installation procedure, just that we are not going to install the client using the image packaging system. Instead, we would be installing the client using a unified archive which we have created of a Solaris 11 box. The unified archive that I would use in this episode for demonstration is downloadable from the Oracle website, along with the other ISO images that exist on the Oracle site. So if you are interested to walk through this along with me, you might want to go fetch that file. It's approximately at 850 MB in size, and you could use that unified archive to perform the automated installation. There is not much of a difference between what you might have seen in the AI installation video and the one that you're about to see. In this video, we would walk through the same set of commands, like the install ADM command to create a service, install ADM command to create a client, install ADM command to create a manifest, and install ADM command to create a profile. The major change that you would observe here is that I would modify the manifest. Last time we modified the manifest to use a local repository, which was 192.168.0.100, but this time around we are not going to install the client using the image packaging system. Instead, we are going to install it using a unified archive. So in the manifest file, instead of image packaging system, you will be mentioning the location of the unified archive. That's the only change you would observe. So I'm not going to spend too much of time running those commands, because we've already seen those commands and what those commands do in the previous episode of automated installation. So in case if you want to have a detailed look at it, you could probably either refer through the documentation of the Oracle website, or you could have a look at the video that is already recorded around the automated installation. Of course, we need a client. As you can see, this is the VirtualBox Manager user interface. There are two virtual machines that are currently running. We will be using mys11-text like before to set up as an AI server. mys11-desktop is going to be used as a machine from where we would connect to mys11-text. Of course, we need a client on which we are expected to perform the Solaris 11 installation using the Unified Archive. So let's go ahead and create a new client, and that's of type Solaris, of course, and Solaris 11 64-bit. Let's give it a name, my client, and go next. To be on the safe side, let's give it as 2 GB of RAM. It's always recommended, if given a chance, assign 4 GB of space for this virtual machine. I move forward to create a new hard disk. 20 GB should be sufficient, but let's give 32 GB, which is the recommended recommended hard disk space for the Unified Archive installation, and I create this virtual machine. You would remember we need to modify the settings. Let's go to the system and say I don't want the floppy to be here in the boot order. I don't want the optical drive. Let's go with the hard disk. It'll attempt to boot from the hard disk. If it doesn't find a bootstrap image in the hard disk, it'll fail to boot. But we also want this virtual machine to attempt to boot from the network. So I hope the boot order is understood. If there is a boot image in the hard disk, it will boot from the hard disk. If it does not find a bootstrap on the hard disk, it will go and broadcast onto the network, and our AI server is expected to respond to that request. The other change, of course, is the network. We want it to be internal network. Only then would we be able to interact with the other virtual machines that exist in there. And from the advanced, of course, we are expected to keep a track of the MAC address of this client, because we need this MAC address to be used while configuring the automated installation. So let me make a note of that MAC address. Okay, so we have the client ready. The client does not have any OS in it. We're going to install the client with Solaris 11 operating system, but this time around our AI server is not going to point this client to an IPS repository from where it could download the packages. Instead, the client is going to extract a unified archive that's already there. Let's go to the management machine, which is my S11 desktop. Remember, S11 desktop has no major role to play in this, except that we're going to connect to the server, the AI server, from this machine. So let's do SSH to the machine which is designated as our AI server. Let me SU to the root user there. Now, if I go to the export share directory, I can actually see a unified archive file. This is the same file that I downloaded from the Oracle website. In case if you would like to create an archive of a Solaris 11 machine, the command that you are expected to use is archiveadm. There are many switches and options that you have with the archiveadm, whether you want to create the archive of the entire set of machines like global zone and non-global zone included, or would you like to create archive only of a specific zone or a set of zones, or you want to create archive in a restore mode. There are many switches that you could use with the archiveadm command, but bear in mind that the archive that you see here has been created by using the archiveadm command. And since this unified archive is only for demonstration It's a very small file. It's a minimal Solaris 11 installation, so that we can get through with the installation procedure quickly. And you would also, if I run the file command, you can actually see it's actually a Unified Archive file. So now that we know that the Unified Archive is there, let me also show you that this directory namespace where the archive is located is actually shared. Export share is where your Unified Archive is. That's a shared file system, so that this archive can be accessed by the remote client by using NFS. NFS is not the only protocol that you could use. You could have this archive in a web server and then use HTTP protocol to access this archive during the installation. The client could access this archive using HTTP protocol also. So we know that there is an archive and we know the location of the archive. That is good. Let's find out if we have any service, AI service running on this machine. We don't have any AI service. We can also verify whether the DHCP server is running. DHCP server is running. This is from the old configuration, but actually the configuration file has nothing in it. I can as well disable this if I want, but let's leave it like that because we're going to reconfigure that in this episode. So let's get started. I'm going to run the command install adm set-server. This is to configure this machine as a DHCP server for our automated installation. I'll say -i 192.168.0.140 and a count of 3, and I will use also a switch called -m. So let me show you that switch there. -m is whether you want the AI to manage the DHCP server. Meaning, if you make modifications on your AI server, do you want the AI server itself to perform the refresh and the restart of the DHCP server, or you want to do that manually? Since my DHCP server on this machine is only meant for automated installation, I don't see a problem using the -m option to let the AI server manage this DHCP. So let's hit enter and see what happens. You can actually see that there is a range of DHCP server added with the base address of 0.140, and like I mentioned, AI server is now going to manage the DHCP, meaning you make modifications to the AI service, DHCP server is going to be restarted by the AI service. Remember, this is one of the commands that was introduced in 11.2. In 11.1, the AI the DHCP server was configured using a different subcommand. If you go through the AI installation video separately, you would know the subcommand that was used with the install adm command to both configure DHCP server and AI service. Now that our DHCP server is ready, let's run the command install adm. Before we run that command, let's see if we have any services configured. We saw this earlier. There is no AI service configured. So let's run the command install adm create -service. -n, let's give it a name. We will call it as x86 UAR. The source where I have the ISO file for the x86 AI image is /mnt/sf/Solaris AI x86.iso. You would remember this from the previous video as well. This is the ISO file for AI x86 boxes for the release 11.3. I want to copy that to the next destination. Let's say export AI install. Okay, so the service is now created. As you can see, it's restarted the DHCP server after adding entries and all that has happened. So now let's Now let's clear the screen and run the command install ADM list. Of course, the actual service that we created is x86 UAR, and that became the default service. The default service was automatically set by the whole process. We don't need it. Let's remove it. All of this I hope you would remember from the previous video, so I'm running through it fast. Let's delete the service default -i386. So that's removed. Okay, so the next step is to add a client. We already made a note of the MAC address. We will have to bind that MAC address with the service we created, and we do that by running the command install ADM create -client -e 08:27:7E:7E:B4. We made a note of this, and it needs to be bound to x86 UAR. Okay, so the client information is also added. So a client with MAC address 08:00:27:7E:7E:7B4 is going to be bound to the x86 UAR. Again, I'm not going to waste time reiterating through the importance of the manifest. We already discussed about the manifest, and we know where the default manifest is. So let's go there, /export/AI/install/auto install manifest, and under that you have many manifest files, many examples in there. Now the one that we used last time as a template to create a custom manifest is the default.xml, because that's where the image packaging system information was, and we modified the image packaging system information to point to our custom IPS. But this time around, we are not going to use the image packaging system. Instead, we're going to use an archive that we have. So there is also a manifest that has definitions for the archive instead of image packaging system. So let's use that as a template. What we will do is let's copy that default_archive to the var.tmp directory, just like we did last time. Go inside the var.tmp directory, open the default_archive.xml. Most of the information in this manifest is similar to what you might have observed in default.xml. You can see the partitioning details, etc. But the software type in the previous XML file, the default.xml was image packaging system, whereas in here it is actually archive. And of course, it is mentioning that the file is under tmp myarchive.uar. That's not where our file is. Our file is elsewhere. So let's find out by going into the export shared directory what is the name of the file. You can actually see the name of the file is sol-11_3 x86.uar. Let's copy that and hit OK. By the way, we have shared it. So this is going to be accessible under the net directory. If you remember AutoFS, that's net/192.168.0.100/export/share, and that's where our archive is going to be located. Let's look at that line again. See, there are examples here. It's actually commented, as you can see. We will remove that comment, but examples are given here. You can say /net/some server/dir my archive. So we'll uncomment those values. I mean, we will uncomment this, of course. This is a comment. We'll remove this. Since this is a comment, let's remove all the lines from here. Okay, so hopefully we haven't made any mistake. As you can see, the software type is not IPS because we are going to install it from a Unified Archive. That's why it's mentioned as archive, the keyword there. And we also mentioned that the archive is located in so-and-so directory. It's NFS, that's why I want the client to pick the archive from the net 192.168.0.100, which is the NFS server. In the NFS server under the export share is where the archive is. So that's clear. So let's save this file and run the command install ADM create -manifest. -f, the manifest is located under var tmp default _archive.xml. We want to specify a criteria, that is MAC is equal to 08:00:7E:7E:7E:B4. Again, you would remember from the previous video that the client, whoever has the MAC address mentioned on this command line, is going to get the manifest, which is default _archive.xml, and this is going to be bound to the service x86 UAR. So the flow is like this. We have discussed this flow in the previous video also. When a client boots, it does a DHCP broadcast. The DHCP server responds to the client contacts the AI server, finds out from the criteria, from the client MAC address, that the service to be used is x86 UAR. x86 UAR has a manifest, which is default _archive.xml. It will find out if the criteria of this client matches the MAC address mentioned for that manifest. If it matches, it picks up from that manifest. That is, it's going to use the archive shared on the NFS server. So let's hit enter and see. I hope. Okay, so looks like I've made some error on the manifest file. So when we modified the comment, probably I made a mistake there. So let's go and fix that. Default.archive. So let's find out where that error is. It's most likely in the archive. This is fine. I think there is a section that I'm expected to remove from here. Okay, let's see if that fixes it. That's on the line number 40, where tmp default, so that's source. Okay, let's see if this fixes it. Right, so line 42. It's closing there, so we can remove that file part and see. Goes through fine. So that was the issue with the close tag and the open tag, and we now have a manifest created, and this manifest is mapped to the client, whoever comes with 08:00:277E:7E:7E:B4. By the way, it's always recommended that you change the name of the manifest to something else other than default. I didn't do that. That's not certainly the best practice, but since it's a demo, I'm okay with it, but it's always good to use a meaningful name for this manifest. So now that we have the manifest, the next step, of course, is to create the profile. You remember that we had to reduce the size of the font to get that wizard. So let's change the size of the font to 14. And let's clear the screen and run the command sysconfig create -profile -o, send the output to a directory called var tmp sysconfig. So let's run through the wizard. This is going to be the client information. Let's give it as my client. Let it be automatic. I think I'll go with the default here. Whatever is the default. Let's give the root password something. It's good. So if I go to var tmp sysconfig, you can actually see there is a file called sc_profile.xml which is going to be used as a profile file for the client. Again, I'm not going to go into the detail because we've already seen this in the last video and we know what it is. So we are left with running one more command, which is install idiom create -profile -p profile1, just a name, and then you specify the file var tmp sysconfig sc_profile for the client with the MAC address 08:00:7:7e:7e:_b4, and it's going to be bound to the service x86 UAR. So it created the profile. If I run the command install idiom list -p, I can see the profile, and it's meant for a client with the MAC address mentioned in there. There is also one small workaround we are expected to do in the dhcpd4.conf. This is for our VirtualBox, because if you remember, we had got an error when we tried the automated install last time, and that error has something to do with a bug in the AI on VirtualBox. So we will specify a fixed address for this. Let's give it as 192.168.0.140. That should help us work around the issue that it faces. Of course, svcs -a grep for DHCP, svcadm disable DHCP/server:/IPv4, svcadm enable DHCP/server:/IPv4. We restarted that. I think we are good to go. Let's go to the client and see what happens. We're going to boot the client. It'll try to boot from the hard disk. Since there is nothing in the hard disk, it's going to perform a DHCP broadcast, and if all is well, we get it, and I go with the automated install. Of course, what is important here is to see whether it picks up the Unified Archive and start extracting the Unified Archive rather than installing the packages from the image packaging system. So far it's all going okay. You can see it's picked up the service correctly, and it has given us the shell prompt if you want. Okay, it gave an error that says it's not readable, export share. Okay, let's find out. We always have an option of logging in and go to the net directory, go to 192.168.0.100, go to export, go to share, and say ls. So there might be a problem with the file name if I'm not wrong. Solaris -11_3-x86.uar. So that seems to be right. File. Okay, so let's try this as root. You remember the root password by default is Solaris. File. Okay, so that's supposed to be a permission issue. What we will do is, just for this episode, we will do a workaround. Of course, it's not recommended. You have to share the file on the NFS server with appropriate permissions, but in here, just to work around this problem, I'm going to make chmod -r 777/export/share. Okay, so that everybody can read the file. Now let's go back and start the system all over again. Let's see what happens. By the way, what I did is certainly not a recommended option. When you share something using the NFS, make sure that you set appropriate permissions for the clients. So if I want, I can drop to the shell. Let's see if it picks up the archive and starts extracting the archive. As you can see, it commences the transfer of the stream, so it's transferring the archive here. If I want, I can log in as Jack and Jack and do a tail on the system/volatile install_log just to keep track of the installation there. Since this is a minimal installation of Solaris 11, the installation is going to be a breeze. It's going to complete very fast. But ideally, an archive file would be fairly big because it'll have your OS with the applications in it and zones in it. So it's going to take a little longer than this, but this is a very minimal UAR, the Unified Archive image that I've used for the installation for the demonstration purpose. That's downloadable from the Oracle website, of course. So you can see that was a breeze. I mean, it says, you can reboot the system if you want to. So it's done. I can actually go back to the shell, su to the root, and do a reboot. So it's come back to the grub. It's booting from the hard disk now. Let's of course, it's a minimal Solaris installation. That is why you see only so many number of the service management facility services in the repository. It's only a UAR for demonstration purpose. So now it's going to do a reboot after the import of the services into the repository. Come back again. Here you go, the name of the client, my client, something that we gave in the system identification. Let's try to log in as a root user. There, supply the password, and we are in. That's great. Qname -a cat/etc/release IPADM show-attr. You remember we made a workaround of assigning the same IP address 192.168.0.140. So all good. PKG publisher. It's going to be the publisher. That's by default because we didn't modify the publisher name in the manifest. So that's the default one, which was there in the archive, of course. So good enough. So I hope this was easily understood because you already know about the automated install, I assume, when you started watching this video. The only change we made was in the manifest file, where we mentioned we didn't want to install the OS from the image packaging system. Instead, we wanted to extract a unified archive that we had. And as you can see, the installation was a breeze. And that's going to be the case even if the UAR file was a little bigger than this. But I hope this was understood and was pretty straightforward. Again, thank you so much for taking time to watch this video.